more extra credit for being... Wait, let me put some into there. If you worked at a restaurant, you worked at any food-based company, back in the day, they had you would get extra credit, you would get extra points to your sanitation score if you had ServSafe. The more ServSafes you had, the more ServSafe certified people that you had in your restaurant, in your business, the more ServSafe certified employees, managers, trainers, things of that nature, the more points, it would put extra points on your sanitation score. That's how it used to work. Think about this. The more credits, when I was in high school, the more credits that you acquired, the more credits that you acquired earlier on, like extra credit, extracurricular activities, while you were in, let's say, when I was like in the 10th and 11th grade, then when we got to the 12th grade, we had something called co-op. I don't know if y'all remember the co-op system. Like, you basically were in a position where you could literally take the work program. That means you only go to class for like 2 classes. You have like 2 periods, and you had your free period as long as you were going to work. The co-op program. When I think about this same aspect, I think about the credibility of you being, and I put it into this post, there's no more extra credit. There's no more extra credit. There's no more extra credit for time served. There's no more extra credit for that. There's no more extra credit for you simply saying, I'm black. There's no more extra credit for that. The beginning of the week, we got into the aspects of the shallow graves, and first video I did, direct shallow graves and unconsecrated grounds. That means the unassessed thoughts, you ain't take ownership in them thoughts, you get what you get from that energy. It goes into this space now where as you're coming into your growing, as you're going into your healing, as you're coming into your internal work, as you're doing your work, you're stop looking for the quantity of the rides, ride shares and pallbearers. You're going to stop looking for one thing that is so detrimental to you understanding it. You're going to stop looking for the incentive or the ride share. All right, we back. You're going to stop looking for the incentive or the ride share. Or when you think about a pallbearer carries the dead body. And you're going to start really paying attention to the quality of the push. The quality inside that push. The quality inside the push. The quality of the push. When you're thinking about the longevity, that's the ride share. It's how long is this, like, think about it like this. You look up at a roller coaster and you look at all the loops and you're like, shit, that's a lot of loops on this roller coaster. It goes really pretty high. And then you start automatically trying to secure or create this visualization in your mind of, did I eat? I saw the roller coaster that I wanted, the ride that I wanted to get on. Did I eat? Should I eat first? Should I wait to eat? And then now it's like in this sense of when you're coming into your growth, you're looking like, no matter how many loops are on there. I know my stomach. I know my stomach. I know my, I know. That's the aspects of you doing this is the aspects of you doing this internal work. You know, based on the comfort, so to speak. You know, based on that sort of comfort. Use an example. If you're sitting in your space, and let's say you're doing your meditation. I always talk about meditation. And you're sitting there with meditation. And you read some information on meditations, and then you hear someone say, okay, cool, like, because I've said it before in earlier lives. The first time you do a meditation, the first thing you think is, I don't have 15 minutes, then take 30 minutes. I don't have 30 minutes, then take an hour. And then think about it. If you say you don't have 15 minutes, then take 30 minutes. Because the same question that you're going to ask about why you don't have 15 minutes is going to be the same question you're going to ask about why you don't have 15 minutes. And it's going to be the same question that you're going to ask about why I don't have an hour. It's going to be the same answer. It's in the aspects that account. Well, I got to do this, or I got to do this, or I got to do this. Okay. This comes into the authority with your growth, that quality of that push. What's that plan, that stepping into that plan for yourself. Stepping out of the comfort, which is just simply reaction. As long as you're reacting, we're always saying this, as long as you're able to react to it based on the preset thought, the what to think, then you're inside of comfort. But if you start really thinking about the how to think, the thought process itself, and you really start assessing that, I started realizing when I really started assessing my how to think process, it gave me the visual, it gave me the lesson, it gave me the diagram. The more that I got into my own thought process, the more that I became more intimate with my thought process, the more accountability I would take inside of a space. Because then I had to think about events where when I was faced with a what to think, like I use an example of my pops being like this, the way my pops was. And I'm thinking about every time that it came up to that sense of when I was asked the question, that trigger would pop up. Like, I don't know what to say. When in reality, it wasn't so much of what to say, it was how to say it. Because that how to say it, no matter what I said, it was like almost the same damn response. For my pops, it was always the same damn response. It was always from a sense of what he had experienced, and on top of those experiences that had not yet dealt with. It was basically what he had not yet dealt with. So anything from, I remember there was one time where I've broke this story down before. Like, I remember this one time where this was during the early 2000s, when Jim Jones first came out and it was Skull Gang, everything and all that shit. And I remember having skull shirts and shoes and belt buckles and shit of that nature. And I remember going to my parents' house, and my pops would look at me and say, and like he would give me this look on his face, and I'm like, why is he giving me this look on his face? And then later on down the line, like when it came time for he wanted to have a conversation with me, this was another trigger point of we need to talk. And then, oh shit, like we don't get deep into that when we was building to this. But he was like, so you in a gang now? I was like, what? No. I'm not. Based on what he's visually seeing in that space, that's all that he can look at. He can't see past that point. See, when you stuck on the what, the who, the when, you don't look past a certain point. because that becomes the physical realm. Like when we think about the what, the when, that is the physical point. That neutral point or that center point, the point of the heart, is the how, and then that how leads to the why. The why is that aspect that's playing in your mind. The why is that, remember we were talking about it, that argument or that thought process that goes on into your mind. If we never get past that what or the who or the when and go into the how, then we can't discuss the why, because that's how we learn to deal with the process. How things work, why things come into certain play. So if I can't tap into the how or the why, even when I get stuck on the how, instead of me going into the why, I go back into the who, the what, and the when. Because I'm thinking about the quantity of the ride and not the quality of that push. I'm thinking about the who, the what, I'm thinking about the who, the what, and the when, or going from an aspect of the quantities. That means if I see, like, give an example, based on where you at in yourself. It's like, if I go to a club, if I'm going to an event, now me going to an event, it was never really the quantities of the people that were there. It could have been one person there, 200 people there, 300 people there. It didn't matter how many people were there. It was the quality or the direction of the energy in that flow in that space. The thought process, how people think, everything that led up to that point, that's really what I needed to look at. So if I have, so think about it like this. You remember, we're changing the perception. You got to challenge your perspective. Because that sense of you staying in this sense of a old perception of yourself, like use the example of, let's say you were fat. Let's say you gained you gained a lot of weight, you got fat, you got out of shape or whatever. It doesn't really matter what you do. You can go lose weight, you can go lose the weight, you can go work out, go lose the weight, you can go buy the new clothes, you can do all of these things. You can do all of that in the physical aspect. But if I'm not assessing the emotions that I felt when I was fat, if I'm not assessing the emotions, my train of thought when I was fat, if I'm not training those thoughts, if I'm not looking at those thoughts that got me to that point, then at any given moment, when the cycle comes back around, now that I'm feeling good, remember it's the balance. Now that I'm feeling good, now I got to assess the balance because I'm focusing on this feeling good part. The negative arises again. So now this comes back into play. See, this is a lot of time when we're looking at that aspect of that ride share. You playing out this, you're making that plan based on that old pattern. Well, I know I can go here, here, and here. And I know if I go left, if I make 4 lefts, then I'm going to be right where I need to be. But I've only went one route. You see, when you're in this mindset, only used to one route or one stream coming into you of how everything's came to you. Everything on that stream that you created has a body you created. Basically, when you're changing out the parts, you're basically just changing out bodies. Whatever body of work doesn't work anymore, you changing the body. Whatever body of work that you putting into that space, it don't work anymore, you change out the body. But you never assess your own mind. That is a creation of your own mind. That is a creation of your own mind. You can have something come in your space that is constantly pushing you. But because you're only hearing it from one space, since you're not understanding, you can go into a space and push. Here, push. But you got to think about how you were pushed. You got to think about how you were. I had to think about how I was pushed when I was younger. I had to think about how I was pushed. And then basically that kinetic action, I would push the same way until I came into that steps of that integration, shedding that old identity, shedding the shedding the credit, shedding these old credits in time served. Remember, you sitting here right now, I'm telling you right now, there's no more credit for you being black. There's no more credit for you being a black woman, a black man. It doesn't matter. There's no credit for time served. There's no credit for time served anymore. When you're thinking about this shadow reset, this is a shadow recession right now. That's why it's so direct. That's why the shit hitting so hard. Because there's no more credit for simply being. This higher grade of energy requires a higher grade of work. It requires that higher aptitude of your discipline with yourself. You have been always, remember, I've always said this. You've always been consistent. You've always been in a sense of balance. But that balance and that consistency was based on comfort, i.e. the reaction. That's the only, as long as I'm able to say as long as I'm able to formulate and say something in reaction to it. As long as I'm sitting there and I can react to it, that means I have the preset script. It don't matter what the hell is on the script or that's in the prompt that I'm going to say. As long as certain things are said or as long as the emotion that I'm using inside of that space is present, then guess what? I'm going to win. I'm going to get I'm worried about the last word. I'm worried about being right. So now, since I got used to that high of that, remember we talked about that earlier this week, talked about that high that you were getting. Now that you keep used to getting this high, you got to think about the consistency of where you go get that high from any other time. Because if you're getting it in your space, you're not getting it in that space to the aptitude of what you're used to taking in or ingesting, you're going to go somewhere else to go get it. In any way, shape, or form, you're going to go get it based on how you're used to getting it. Based on that narrative, based on that ride share, based on quantity. Instead of the quality of the push. That quality in that push, that's going to push you into that level of accountability you're needing. See, the accountability in that aspect is whenever you're inside of a space, now you're thinking about the individual aspect of yourself and you're looking into how your process brings you into certain narratives. You're not looking at it based on the quantity anymore. You're not looking at it based on quantity. Remember, I've talked about this with the LLC. The LLC mentality is that ownership principle. You can be an employee at any place, but the thing that makes an employee different from somebody that advances in that same space is that when somebody everybody went in there looking the same, but I think about it like this. Every time I went into a space, I didn't go into the space in the employee mindset. Even though I still had employee-based emotional intelligence, I didn't go in with the employee mindset. But here's the thing. Since I did not understand my emotional intelligence going into a space, and I had the managing mentality, naturally, I'm only managing based on avoidance. So now I'm managing based on superiority. So when you going into these spaces with yourself, yes, you may have grown. You may have an experience based on that traumatic aspect. You may have an experience, but you have to remember, until you own the experience, you don't own that emotion. That's why when you go into a space and because of an experience, it made you angry. Let's go to the first experience that ever made you doubt yourself. Let's go to the first experience that ever made you feel insecurity, self-worth, whatever it may be inside of that space. Let's go to that first. Because it doesn't matter what you do in the current, it's feeding the existing. Until I bring the existing to the present. So now in between my existing and now, between when it happened and now, I'm literally creating ride shares. I'm literally taking whether I made a perpetual bus or I hopped on the bus, I hopped on a plane. Don't hop on a plane, because when you think about it like this. Think about that high that you're searching for. If I hop in an Uber, hop in a Lyft, hop in a taxi, if I miss the stop, I can, hey, we missed the turn. But now Okay, cool. I'm gonna have to pay some money to assess the turn. If I hop on the train, I gotta wait till the next stop, but then I gotta find another route. But if I hop on that plane, that means I'm riding that high. That means wherever that plane goes, I gotta wait until it gets there before I gotta pay a different price when I get there. See, a lot of times we're not looking at the aspect based on that quality. You're looking at we get stuck in the aspects of time or that aspect of the longevity. So automatically, since you stuck in longevity, you looking at the end, you looking at the beginning, and you're not really assessing anything in between. Because your pattern was never to look at the in between. You went through you probably had the 1, you probably had the 2, you probably had 1 month, 2 months, 3 months at your job, 4 months at your job, got to that 6-month point at your job. But then after the 6 months and you didn't get the raise, or you didn't get this, or this happened, then this happened, whatever events happened in between month 1 and 6, and then you sitting there, oh shit, but then everything kept going forward but you, and you wonder how you got stuck. Now there's another person came in that started at month 1, but all of a sudden at month 3, they got an advance, you gotta think about how they came in. You got to think about what they had a plan. There's a difference in a plan and a pattern. See, a lot of times I was getting worried, like whenever I was thinking about jobs, and in my mind I'm saying to myself, I don't want to be here forever. I don't want to get locked in and stuck. So since I said that, I had to remember the power of my words. Every time you speak, you open up a portal. What comes through that portal, you're gonna have to deal with. So I'm sitting in that portal. I'm like, I don't want to get. I'm not trying to be here forever. I'm not trying to do this, and this. So now I create in my space, I'm seeing the variations. I'm seeing like, for example, my last job. Prior to the last year of me and my last job, I told the story in a lecture. One of my managers, during the Christmas party, I call this the Christmas party story. During the Christmas party, that's when everything came to an end for him. He was like bringing people in, paying them under the table, like taking a whole fiasco of shit came up. And I remember the last day he was there, and I remember trying to walk into the kitchen. He walking out like with because his time was up. So now I'm looking in the space, and instead of everybody like, oh my God, he was doing all these things, instead of me talking about people, like everybody was trying to find out what happened. And since I was in that space, they thought I should know what happened. I knew what happened, but it wasn't for them. See, this is one aspect when you think about the quality. The quality. Does it, like everything's going forward. Everything's going forward. But everything, you have to assess your direction. What's in your direction? The quality that you're trying to come into. You got to realize quality is efficiency. So if I'm efficiently setting my tone, how do I efficiently set my tone to come into the space? So now I never have to worry about because you got to think about the things that you say to yourself. Now I got to go do this. Now I got to go do this. Now it's my time to do this. You're still separated from it. You're not it. You're not that. That's why you treat everything from the employee mentality, that employee aspect. You treat everything as a job or as work. Whether you acknowledge that you treat it as a job or as work, everything in your space becomes job and or work. And everything that you do based on your level of energy, based on that space, becomes the job or the work. And the more the energy that you put into that space is all based on the incentive from it. So you can be in this space right here, and because you're not getting this, you're not going to put as much energy into it. But remember, energy doesn't die. You put it into something else. So now you're not putting the same energy into this. And then, okay, cool. This still remains. It remains as what it is. But now you got to check the quality of your energy. See, you thinking about the quantity. You think you're thinking with that quantity. I used to think with that quantity aspect. So like so whenever I didn't do something in a certain space, it triggered me feeling powerless. It triggered these aspects within inside of myself that I did not yet deal with. So every time that something happened that was outside, that was based on the circumstance, basically all it was showing me is that I had a pattern that I had not yet assessed and I did not learn how to plan. Okay, that's where the accountability was coming from. Because now when you sit inside of that position with yourself, you're like, oh, that's what that looks like. And then this when we hit that point with yourself where you're like, oh my God, I'm upset. Now when you coming down off the high, because this is you coming down off of the high. You had whatever you had. So you had that sustainable high. And then you didn't as you were in the high, there was a difference between becoming the high, becoming your low, owning your lows and owning your highs, and then seeking or chasing the high, or chasing the high, running away from the low. There's a difference between chasing and then you come into that state of attraction with yourself. See, there's no need to, if you say things like, you have to think about the new elements of your mindset. If you say that you're chasing your dreams, you're always going to be running after them. If I say that I'm chasing my dreams, then I'm always going to be running after my dreams. So everything that I need to learn in between the dream or whatever I'm trying to do to get to that point, I'm not paying attention to. So now something has to take that place in order for me to even see my dream. That becomes the pattern. So now everything, you got to think about everything that's in your old pattern. If your old pattern involves that lack of discipline to yourself, then getting to your dream is going to be, you're going to defer yourself from the dream. You're going to defer yourself from that aspect because you're thinking about the quantity. You're thinking about time served. You thinking about time served because you ain't looking at them timestamps. The timestamps is the track record. Everything that you desire in the aspect is based on the quality of the push or the strength behind the words that I put into that space. Everything that you've already created it, either in this cycle, past cycles, there's a perception of you in that space. But as long as you're sitting in this space and you're only looking at it from the singular, you're looking at it from this one position, everything that comes up, because once you have the thought, it's now how to think. It's the process. You automatically slip into how to think. How to think is the creation. Not the logic. You're thinking what to think based on that logic and to stay within logic and reason. This happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. Stay within that instead of the new creation. That unlocking that energy. Because that energy is needed for you to do what. See, when you stuck in that predisposition with yourself, that's what happens. And then you basically put yourself, like I said yesterday, when you stuck in that predestination, that's a dangerous place to be. Being stuck in that predestination is a dangerous place to be. Being stuck in that space is very dangerous because it keeps your pattern going. It keeps you from that. It keeps you out of accountability. Every time something happens, the first thing that you say was, well, they or them or that or who, what, when. But you got to think about what you said before that. You're still not taking accountability for your emotions. Your emotions is how you move. Owning that emotion is how you maximize and owning that energy when you're inside of that space. I'm maximizing it. Whatever emotion that you're in, you gonna maximize it. So then you gotta, I remember I had to stop telling myself that something was I had to stop telling myself we have to stop telling ourselves that This is making me this. This is making me that. Because now you give it a life. Now whatever perception of this, whatever perception of that place, thing, whatever it is, it still exists. You still need it. It's like me looking at my old, it's like me looking at an old job or old relationship or old friendships and then giving them the reason why we ain't this, and this anymore is because this, and this. They did this and they did this and they did this. But now it's an imbalance. So I need them there to keep me in the balance. Because remember, everything's in balance. Yeah, give them power, so to speak. So now everything that's in that space, I got to keep it, that keeps me in balance. So you got to think about how many times you've done that inside of your space. Whether it was you gave somebody a credit card, you gave somebody access to your phone plan. I'm thinking, yeah, I'm giving access to a phone plan, whatever it is. In order for that energy to remain, that's why it stays there. And then when you go into a new space, new accounts, now accountability, going through the process, you notice that every time you go into the space, now you got to look back at your track record with that type of account. What is your track record with that account? What is your track record with the communication device? What is your track record with your energy inside of using that type of account for that space? What is not based on longevity. It's not based on the quantity or how many times you've done it. It's the quality or the efficiency of the push while you did it. Because if I'm only looking at the quantity and how many times I've done it, then I'm never going to take into accountability the quality of the push. See, the quality of the push is what it led me to start doing. So now when I go into the new space for the new account based on credibility, I got to look at my old accounts and because 9 times out of 10, if I don't deal with it, it's going to come back up. It's going to happen again because I did not I didn't look at my track record. That track record, remember I tell you that track record is the point of vulnerability. You go past exposure. Because that accountability in that side of being that vulnerable state of sitting there with your track record, it don't matter if you had 100 bodies or 7 bodies. It was the quality of the push of what they led you to do. That's why you have that's why you got motherfuckers, that's why you got shit like Bad Girls Club, Basketball Wives, and Love and Hip Hop, and shows of that narrative that are in reflection to help you consume that thought process in your mind of, yeah, but you never really even thought about it to yourself. Like, what does your energy, if you don't understand your energy and you don't have that emotional intelligence with your energy and you really haven't dealt with it, then whatever you create inside that space is going to be an unknown variable to you anyway. It's like, I remember I put up a post a couple of weeks ago. I remember I put up a post a couple of weeks ago, and it was from last year. It was one of my memories, and I made another post, and I kind of made it for the masculine perspective. But it was like I remember I looked at the comments of that, and the shorties were like, "Yeah, I didn't have niggas like threaten to kill me and run up in my house and fight me and do all these other things." I was like, so in my mind now. That never was a point for me, but it wasn't about me judging. It was me looking at using the sermon. I was like, wait, so your energy ain't never pushed, ain't never gave a quality type of push. Your power ain't never gave a quality type of push. Your power ain't never really made someone take a real look, like assess themselves. Like even when I sit here and I'm like just thinking about the aspects, that's with my late is like, no matter what it is, no matter what is said, I can absorb it and learn from it. That's quality in a push. And in return, based on the aspect of growing that aspect of the love that's already present, that becomes the cycle. Because that's a connection in that space. See, when you're thinking about the ride share aspect, you got a bunch of people around you that will ride with you, that will agree with you, that'll make you, that if you say, hey, am I right? They'll be like, yeah, you right. You got a bunch of people like that around you. But at that same time, I want you to think about it. When you sitting there inside that space and you said you wanted to go to the library, you wanted to go work out, you wanted to go do something that was going to expand your consciousness. And you wanted to expand your mindset or break these old patterns with yourself. What usually happens? Because I've had consultations with people and they'll be like, well, what if they don't want to talk about it? They're giving you the answer that you need. What if my family doesn't want to have that conversation? They're giving you the answer that you need. You're not looking for a what, you're looking at a how. Their process of thought. That means if somebody come up to me, if I ask somebody a question, and their answer is heavily inside of an emotional aspect, and it's based on avoidance, since I define avoidance, or what the energy of avoidance looks like in its simplest form, I can assess it because I've already done that assessment. I've seen the variations of that. You've done it all in your multiple perspectives of yourself. So I know what it looks like. So now when you go into the space, like, oh, they gave me the exact answer that I needed. They gave me what I needed based on a lesson to learn. That thought process. Because you can tell when somebody's stuck within an aspect of a pattern. It's something as simple as somebody like, hey, what we doing Friday night? What we doing tonight? What we doing today? What we doing? You can say I'm not doing anything. I'm going to do this, and this. And they already got a thought process in their mind. Hey, let's go and do this. And then you ain't even looking back at the last 3 nights that you did it, the last 4 days that you did it. Damn. You're automatically going to you're looking for an assessment of why. You're looking for the what, the who, the when, and the how they're able to do it. How they're able to do that. You're not looking at the why they're doing it. Because the why ultimately is the accountability, is the assessment. No matter what the why is. Because that why is going to match your why. Because that's the attachment. Your why is their why. That's how you connect into that space. That's how this is either attachment or the connection. It's that why. That's either the obstacle or the opportunity. The obstacle is the acquiring of the debt, the emotional debt, and the opportunity is the resource to assess that debt. Take the accountability and go into the assessment of that debt. How I keep creating this emotional void that I keep trying to fill, it's a void. It's limitless. A void is limitless. If you think about space outside of you, it is a limitless void and it is growing. That is symbolism in as you go deeper, as motherfuckers are going deeper into their shadows, doing that internal work, that shit is getting bigger. Because it's vast and it's only based on a reflection of you doing the work. That's you being consistent. So if you're noticing inside of your space, I've said this before. If you notice inside of your space where you used to be at in a certain space, but then you remove yourself for a couple of days or a couple of months or a couple of weeks, you'll always notice that someone of your same why is in that position. They're not exactly like you. They're not, this is how we get stuck. I ain't nothing like that. Yeah, you are. Or else you couldn't even see that or else you couldn't even see this person. See, a lot of times when we're thinking about think about people. You're thinking about people being they're childish and they act a certain way, and oh my God, just because you wouldn't do it in the way that, just because you do it in a more visually appeasing way to yourself, doesn't mean that you're not doing what they're doing. That's like if I sat here and the same definition undertone, and when I get angry, mad, I'm shooting at everybody and whatever, and I'm doing it verbally, and then somebody else, when they get mad, they do it physically, it isn't the fact that they're doing it physically and I'm doing it verbally in a mental sense to fuck somebody up. It's the emotional, that's that triangular point. It's the emotional point that we're both acting from. That's how that energy creates that space. So that's why you look at certain people inside of your life after you go back and do an assessment, like, damn, they were kind of like me based on the emotional aspect. Or they were kind of like me on the mental aspect. Or they were kind of like me in a physical aspect. Or they can be mixes of it all. Because it was the ride share. It was the pallbearer. It was the dead weight. It was the unconsecrated ground. It was the shallow grave. Both of y'all go, just because both of y'all go into the cemetery because they go into the plot over here, you go into the plot over here, it doesn't mean that you still don't have shallow graves with the same emotional undertone. So you just keep repeating. All right, cool. That's why it's so easy. That's why you so active. That's why, yeah, that is what a trauma bond, that is exactly what a trauma bond is. A trauma bond is based upon a physical, based on a physical aptitude, a mental aptitude, or an emotional aptitude. They all still connect, but whichever one became the most prevalent in front. That means it was a physical attachment. A physical attachment, now it leads to the aspect of the emotional and the mental. So the mentality and the emotions now connect to this physical. So now everything else becomes an assumption based on that physical connection. And this is when we're talking about aspects of sexual trauma and the traumatic experience, whatever. So it's like, even, we don't talk about guys, we don't do the guys now. We're going to do the guys today because, we still got the retreat coming. If you learn, the way that you learn to have sex, as an example, this goes for both sides. The first encounter that you had with sex, if you have not dealt with that aspect, that means you haven't went through that acknowledgement, acceptance. You have not done any healing internal work to that aspect. In your current state, in multiple variations, because sacred energy exchange, not just in a physical form, but also in the mental and the emotional connected to that physical point, that's what's creating your space. So the same way that you learn sex in a physical aptitude, that's the same thought. The same way you process sex is the same way you process your emotions. Is the same way you process your mentalities. And everything lies in between these. Now you got the ride share sitting in between those. You got the lift you got the bus that goes, you got the bus that takes the distance all the way to your emotions. You got the Uber or the Lyft or the taxi going all the way to your mental. And then you got the airplane going all the way back to the physical. So now you're thinking about the airplane would be assumption, the physical aspect, that bus, that's the aspect of your emotional development. And then you come back down here and then you're looking at your mental development. How you can control, how you block things out in your mind with this, how you're blocking things out and suppressing memories based on that mental development. So now everything you bring into your space is based on that quantity. You need that amount of quantity in your life because that's the traumatic experience. That's the trauma bond. You really start thinking about it when, this is why I say it's so important to really look at how do you start your day. It don't matter how, it doesn't really matter when you start your day at first. It just matters, are you looking at how you start your day? Exactly. You say, that's my train of thought. What passengers you got on the train? You ain't taking no. So when you're thinking about your train of thought, now in this example, in that visualization, you know how you got the ticket master, got the little punch? It's time for you to start punching those tickets and really start paying attention to what tickets you lit in. But you got to look at the previous passenger list. You on that plane, you got to look at the manifest. You got to break into your black box. You on the bus, you thinking about speed. You thinking that if you slow down, the bus gonna explode. You see how you thinking about the Uber and the ride share. You're wondering now you in the current cycle. You weren't like, if that motherfucker turn around and cough, or if the car smell like throw up. Every one of these aspects have a facilitated way of thought to them. Exactly. It's all in the way. Remember yesterday we talked about the aspect of word association. Everything you're doing, this is what it means by saying birds of a feather flock together. If your friend, when you say them bitches is hoes or them niggas ain't shit, you're thinking about people that really do not have an emotional literacy to themselves. So they abuse the physical in that aspect. They abuse the physical. So you getting triggered by motherfuckers that are hoes, you got to look into your life and be like, where do I abuse my physical energy? Anything that I bring into the physical, what do I abuse physical? If you're looking at people with their mentalities are a certain way, or stuck in a certain mentality, in what ways do I abuse my own mentality? In what ways do I abuse my own emotions? In a sense of the distraction of my control. You got to really start thinking as you're growing, it's the quality of that push. It's no longer the quantity of the ride share. You can go tomorrow. You can use an example. You've never been in a limousine. You've never been in a limousine, or you've been in a limousine, or you've been in the long stretch car. You'll do everything to get into that damn car. But because you did it one way, visually appealing, and if somebody did it the other way, that was not visually appealing, it didn't mean that y'all didn't do the same thing. It didn't mean that it wasn't about, oh, I didn't know him, or you didn't know him, or I knew him. It wasn't about that. It was about the aptitude of you knowing yourself to what level you're willing to go to and based on that acceptance. It's like going out somewhere and you expect that when you go out somewhere, you have a certain train of events that line up to when you go somewhere. Until I assess, it doesn't matter what I'm doing inside of that space or what it means, until I assess the emotions behind that, I only look for this one way to do something. So I can't create any other way. So now I'm stuck and I'm dependent upon others creating different ways inside of my comfort zone. Because in my mind, I'm used to creating these different ways inside of my comfort zone. So anything that comes out of nowhere and hits me upside my head. Oh shit, I got hit. And it forces me to really start thinking about not what to think, but how to think. That quality I get used to. Well, I like that quality. But since I'm not assessing, remember we talked about yesterday with that, thinking about you sitting in the car, you sitting in the car, it got the rear view mirror, it got the reverse camera, but since you're not used to that level of technology, when you do start using it, you become dependent on it, just like you got dependent on turning around, and then you now forget the mirrors on the side, because you're not integrating with it. See, it's integration. Remember, as we opened this up with, you being black, there's no more extra credit. There's no more extra credit. There's no more credit for time served. All you can use that is for all accounts. It's like, I want you to visualize it like this. Everything that you have been through is only a credibility till you go into GameStop. And we all know about GameStop. If you don't, that means you can take $100 worth of games that you could have bought yesterday. You could have bought $300 worth of games yesterday from GameStop. If you take them back next week, they're only worth $1 a piece. They're only worth $1 a piece. You can be upset, or you could have read the guidelines before you went into the space. And the guidelines that read into the space, they're on your contract. And ain't none of them were. And then you like, nigga, I just bought God of War 4 and God of War 6, and I just bought this game yesterday. What do you mean it's only worth $25? I just spent $85. You bought it with emotion. You bought it, everything down here is based on emotion. You bought it with emotion. The emotion dissipates, and then what happens? But as well, I desire you to be the fucking best. From this point, realizing that healing is destructive, you're deserving, but you're not entitled. Tomorrow, Friday night Lexus, 8 p.m., we are going to be getting into the body in the temple. It's going to be hard, the body in the temple. Y'all stay tuned for that. Consultations, readings, any aspects, hit me up in the inbox. Let's get something started. I love you. You love us. Ashe.